be part of our class. Alright, so we are continuing our study on the life of Jesus, and so we are walking chronologically through Jesus' life here on earth, the time that we have. And so right now we are up to, last week we talked about his mission in Galilee. And we talked about that he is a teacher who heals, and so his ministry was to teach, and then he also healed people as he went along. And so this week we're going to see him call more disciples and do more teachings and more healings. So we're kind of staying in Galilee for a little while because he was in Galilee for almost 2 years. And so we know a lot of what happens in Jerusalem because of the majority of the Gospels cover what happens in Jerusalem. But he did spend about 2 years traveling the region of Galilee. Okay? So we're first going to be in Matthew 9, and some of these references up here are just for y'all to have because some of the gospel writers cover the same event in multiple times and some don't, so I like to give you all of them. And so we talked last week about some of the healings, and now we are going to talk about the disciples. So we're going to talk about Matthew's call in Matthew 9, and we are going to hear from Matthew himself, who writes his own account of his own call. So when we left Jesus, he was at home in Capernaum. Remember, he moved from Nazareth to Capernaum and set up his base in Capernaum. He had healed the paralytic man. Remember the guy who was brought by the 4 friends and they lowered him down out of the ceiling and he healed him. Okay? And we know at this point he has Andrew, Peter, James, and John, his 4 disciples with him. Now we're not sure about Philip and Nathaniel. The Bible doesn't tell us if they too went back to their home in their life or they continued with him. We don't really know. They could still be there. They could be back in their old life. We're not sure. So let's hear Matthew's call in his own account, Matthew 9:9. Really simple. Matthew's got a very simple testimony here. As Jesus passes on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. So if you guys don't have your testimony down to 2 sentences, I encourage you to do that, okay? Matthew tells his own story here, and he says, "I was simply doing my job, and Jesus walked by one day. He said, 'Follow me,' and I got up and left, and I followed him." Okay, so that's Matthew's own account of his own call to follow Jesus. Now, we are going to take a little bit more in depth at the very end of this, hopefully if I have saved enough time to talk about all 12 of the disciples, so we're going to hold on to Matthew's story. Let's talk about tax collectors. Now, if you don't know, tax collectors at that time were notorious sinners, okay? They were up there with the harlots, all right? These were really bad Jews, okay? And they were regarded by the Jews as collaborating with Rome, okay, against their fellow Jews. Now, the Jewish people thought them rightly as traitors, okay? They were traitors to the Hebrew people because they worked for the Roman government. They had support of the Roman government. They had soldiers at their disposal to make people pay their taxes, okay? They also had to bid for the job. So, of course, usually high bid wins. They then had to make up for that by overcharging their own people in their own community in order to pay off their bid and then make a profit. So they were mostly thieves, okay? Selling out their own people, traitors to the Jewish way of life, okay? They, because of all of that, could not stand as a witness in a Hebrew court of law, and they could not participate in a synagogue. So they were almost cut off from their own people because of their job, okay? Because of the job they decided to take. So one of these, Matthew, is just sitting at his tax booth collecting taxes. Jesus walks by, extends a very simple call, "Follow me." And Matthew gets up and leaves his booth behind. Now we've already seen Peter and Andrew and James and John when they were cleaning their nets and Jesus said, "Follow me." They walked away. Well, Matthew's call is similar, but it is more difficult because at any point, and we've seen Simon and Andrew and James and John return to their boats, Matthew could never go back to his booth. Once he got up and left, he would be marked as a traitor now by Rome. So he's a traitor to his own people, and now he's a traitor to Rome, and now he's out of a job. And he can't go back to that job. So for him to answer the call of "follow me" was a huge sacrifice on Matthew's part. And he gets up and he follows after Jesus. Okay? Now, could you imagine Jesus is making the introductions of Matthew? If you've seen The Chosen, it's really well done in The Chosen. Matthew, our tax collector and our traitor, fellas, the guys you've stolen from, okay? Welcome aboard, right? And they embraced each other with loving open arms and said, come on, we're going to all follow Jesus together, right? Okay, yeah. Probably didn't happen that way. They probably were very skeptical of Matthew at first, okay? So let's continue on Matthew's gospel. And verses 10 says, and as Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And then here come the Pharisees. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? But when he heard it, being Jesus, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. And I quote, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I have come not to call the righteous, but the sinners. All right, so Matthew is so excited that Jesus has called him that he decides to throw himself a going away party, okay, because he cannot come back. And he invites all of his friends, all the other sinners, okay, and we're going to have a great party. We're going to invite Jesus and all his disciples. We're going to feast, and we're going to toast, and we're going to celebrate that I am giving my life to Christ. And here come the Pharisees, right? They weren't invited to the party, okay, but they show up to the party unannounced. And they ask his disciples privately, hey, why does your teacher eat with these types of people? Doesn't he know who these people are? Now Jesus, defending himself, overhears this conversation, decides to answer on his own behalf. And he says, I didn't come for you. I came for them. I'm a physician, right? I'm here for the sick, not the well. Now the Pharisees are the doctors, okay? They're the doctors of the law, okay? They were like doctors who avoided sick people at all costs. They did not want to risk infection. Now, they wanted their patients to get well. Don't misunderstand. They wanted people to be well, but they were going to avoid them at all costs because they were not going to be infected by these sick people. How dare you be sick? Can't you just be well? Okay? These were the Pharisees. Jesus, on the other hand, could not be infected by sinners, and so he did not have any problem getting his hands dirty and spending time with sick people, because he could not be infected. Okay? And then Jesus gave these Pharisees a homework assignment. Okay? These are the intellectuals. He gives them a homework assignment. He says, go figure out what this means. And he quotes a passage from Hosea 6:6. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Now that is God talking to the people of Hosea's day. During that time, people of Hosea's day were great about bringing sacrifices still to the Lord, but they had forsaken mercy. Okay? They had abandoned mercy because they did not understand God. They didn't understand why they were bringing sacrifices. They just continued to do it without understanding why. Okay? And so God is telling them through the prophet Isaiah that I would rather have right hearts full of mercy and truth than any sacrifice that you could bring to me. So Jesus gives them a homework assignment. Go back to your Bibles and figure out what this means. Okay? Now hold on to that because we're going to come back to that later. But remember, he gives them a homework assignment. And I love Jesus as the teacher because he's going to follow up with that homework assignment. All right. So in light of this event, a question is raised, and we're going to hop over to Mark 2. So Mark 2 and verses 18 to 22. Now John's disciples, this is John the Baptizer, John the Baptizer's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came and said to him, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisee fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests feast while the bridegroom is with them? Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast in that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunken cloth to an old garment. If he does, the patch is going to tear away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine in an old wineskin. If he does, the wine will burst the skin, and the wine is just destroyed, and the skin also. But new wine is for fresh wineskin. Okay? So, we don't know exactly when this takes place, but it could have happened at Matthew's party. Okay, remember, he's feasting. Okay, so this could have happened here. And if we compare the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke together, we're told that these people kind of raise questions about fasting. They're curious, okay? But the basic question here is one of comparison, okay? The Pharisees and their disciples, John the Baptizer and his disciples, they all fast as much as twice a week. Could you imagine? That's a great diet plan, right? Fasting twice a week, okay? As much as twice a week. But Jesus' disciples don't fast. They are abstaining from fasting and they are feasting. If it happened here at Matthew's party, we got a great party going on and they're not fasting, okay? So the Pharisees are trying to figure out what is going on. Now remember, we also have two of John's disciples here. Andrew and John were two of John the Baptizer's disciples. So if they had been fasting with John and now they're partying, the Pharisees want to know why. Okay? Why have you left that practice behind? Okay? So Jesus explains with a comparison. The Pharisees fasted as a display of righteous pride. Okay? John the Baptizers were fasting because they were preparing for Messiah. And Jesus said, my disciples feast because I'm here. But when I'm not here, they will go back to fasting. Okay? So what he's trying to explain is that there was an appropriate time, an appropriate place, and an appropriate attitude about fasting. Okay? Because the Pharisees would literally paint their faces, right? They would wear big baggy clothes to make them look shrunken and like skeletons of like, I'm such a good faster, I'm even losing weight fasting. Okay? Look how sick I look. Okay? They would put on this whole display about it. Okay? And Jesus goes on to explain with some parables because we usually learn better from stories. Okay? And he says, no one tries to repair the old with new. Otherwise, both are destroyed when you try to do that. Okay? And he's hinting here that the new is coming. The new is coming. Okay? We're not destroying the old with the new. We have something new coming, a new covenant. Okay? All right, so Jesus and his disciples, they go back to Jerusalem. There is a feast that we're told in John 5. So we're going to go over to John and spend a little bit of time in John. Now, we're not told which feast it is. This might have been the Passover. We actually have 3 feasts that all Hebrew males were required to attend to. Some made excuses. They didn't go every year. But Jesus does. So this is either Passover or the feast that happens toward November and October. But there's a feast going, and Jesus goes to Jerusalem like he's supposed to. And we read in John 5, verses 1 through 6. Now there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool. In Aramaic, it's called Bethsaida, which has 5 roofed colonnades, and in these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said, do you want to be healed? Okay. So in Jerusalem, they have recently discovered this pool called Bethsaida, and it has 5 colonnades, which has 5 roofs over it, surrounds this pool. Okay? Just as it was in the Bible, so we find in archaeology. So what we're told here is that the people who were lame and blind and invalid, paralyzed and things, they would lay at this pool underneath the colonnades for shade, and when the waters moved, they believed that the first person who rushed down into the steps and touched the water was the person that was going to be healed. Okay? So this was the belief of this culture about this pool. Now, they credited that account to an angel. And an angel, who didn't have anything better to do, just hung out by the pool, and at random points in time would stir the waters, and imparting some of God's healing magic in the waters. Okay? So that is a supernatural explanation of what was happening. Now, we have accounts that whoever got in the water was healed. But remember the placebo effect. You really, really believe something, your body can do amazing things. Okay? So we have a supernatural possibility that an angel who doesn't have anything better to do could have been stirring up the waters, and God could have been blessing the faith of a person going down there. Supernatural possibility. We also know that many of the water sources in Jerusalem were fed by living springs. So when the water in the air comes bubbling up, it looks like it's actively moving. So a natural possibility. That could be another possibility. We also have some pools in Jerusalem that were part of a system where they could actually move water around throughout the city. They had these gates and levels and things like that because they needed water to move in order for it to be used for ceremonial purposes. That's what a Jew believes. The water has to move in order for it to be clean. So a human could have been sitting there pulling the different gates and making the water move. So we have a human possibility. We don't know which one's right. It could have been all three. We have no idea. But regardless, these people were there believing that if they got down into the water, they would be clean. Okay? So for whatever reason, water moves, people get in. Well, on this day, there's a guy here, and he has been paralyzed, it tells us, for 38 years. Y'all, I am 39. I cannot imagine 38 years of being paralyzed. Okay? But he is lying there, and Jesus shows up on this day. Now, we don't know how many times this guy has been taken to there, because he's paralyzed. He's not getting himself there. Somebody else is having to take him there. And we're told, and a little later, that this is a Sabbath day, which means he was probably dropped off the day before and left there, and won't be picked up until tomorrow. Okay? So he's just being left there, along with several other people who were also being left there. Or he could have been there for days, or weeks, months, we have no idea. But regardless of how long he's been by the pool, 38 years is a long time to wait for a miracle. Okay? We're also not told why Jesus doesn't heal anybody else while he's there. We're told that there's a multitude of people around those 5 porches. And he only was up to one gentleman. Okay? Now Jesus asked him a very simple question. Do you want to be healed? And we go, of course. Who's going to say no to that? Right? Well, in the Greek, the word not only encompasses health, it encompasses wholeness and pureness. Do you want to be whole? Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be pure? So he is asking this question. Jesus also knows that not everybody wants to be healed. Because after 38 years of dealing with this, he's probably lost hope. And in that hopelessness, he comes up with excuses. Okay? He doesn't answer Jesus' question. He doesn't say, oh, yes, sir. He goes, how am I supposed to be able to do that? There's nobody that takes me down in the water. All these people getting ahead of me. They have all got their miracles, and I'm sitting here still ain't got my miracle. You hear all the excuses talking out of hopelessness. Okay? So Jesus tells him, what does he don't tell him? He doesn't tell him, go get in the water, or I'll help you into the water. He doesn't say any of that. He says, get up, take your bed, and walk. So if you're an invalid, you've been paralyzed for 38 years, you know your body doesn't work. And somebody comes along and tells you to get up. Are you going to get up? Or are you going to go, what are you talking about? I can't get up. So now he's out of excuses. But he has to make the choice. Do I get up? So he stands up. And in that moment of faith is healed. The faith to get up heals him. Okay? Now he rolls up his bed mat, which could have been a reed mat or a little bit of cushion on there. He rolls it up and he walks away with his mat tucked under his arm. And the people rejoice, right? Everybody rejoices. This man is amazing. Look at what Jesus did. Except the Pharisees come this way, right? No, wrong. We're told that it's a Sabbath day. Okay? Here come the Pharisees again. Instead of rejoicing with the man who was walking away from being paralyzed for 38 years, they go, what in the world, sir, are you doing? Why are you carrying that mat around? Don't you know it's the Sabbath? How dare you work on the Sabbath?
Weren't they working too then by doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to get there. How dare you, sir? How dare you? What are you doing? This is wrong. You are breaking our tradition. Okay? He was not breaking any laws, nor any commandments from God. This was an oral tradition passed from rabbi to rabbi of what it means to work on the Sabbath. Because God said, don't work. And they go, what does that mean?
Move.
What requires is work.
Movement.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't carry stuff in your pockets. You couldn't carry a needle in case your stuff broke. You could not carry anything because it was the appearance that you were going to do work. Okay? So you couldn't carry anything on the Sabbath.
I should take my bed to go take a nap.
Right? Can't carry a bed. Can't carry a bed. That's too heavy. Can't do that. And the Pharisees go and question this man. And they want to know why he is doing this. When actually he's doing less work than what was required for somebody to bring him there. Because you need probably at least 2 people to bring him there, 2 people to bring him back again, and he's just carrying a nap. So he's actually doing a lot less work on the Sabbath than what would have been required, right? And he told them, I don't know the man who healed me. He left. He didn't give me his calling card, right? Didn't tell me his name. He didn't say, hey, if any of your friends need a healer, here I am, right? Which would have been the expectation at the time. Spread the word so I can make some more money. But this guy just leaves, probably because Jesus knows as soon as this man gets his healing, everybody else is going to start crowding around him. Okay? He doesn't want a scene right now. Remember, it's a feast day. We've got a lot of eyes on us. Well, later on, Jesus goes to the temple, and he finds the man that he healed, and he gives him further instructions. Now, we don't know why the man is in the temple. He could have been in the temple because it's a feast day, and now he's finally getting able to participate. After 38 years of not being able to go to the temple, he gets to go to the temple and participate in Jewish life. Or the Pharisees could have told him, you sinned and you need to go pay for your sin, and you need to go to the temple and offer sacrifice. He could have been there because he needed to offer a sacrifice for his sin of carrying a mat. We don't know why he's there, but he's there. And Jesus tells him to sin no more. Right? You are now free. Why would Jesus do that? Why would he give him some further instructions? Because for 38 years, this man has been paralyzed. His limitations, he hasn't been able to do a whole lot, right? He hasn't been able to go out into life and do a bunch of the sins that other people were doing because he's paralyzed. He can't go anywhere. So now that he has freedom, Jesus is warning him, with that freedom, be careful. Because now you may commit greater sins because you have freedom. Okay? So that's a word for us too. We have a lot of freedom as Christians, and we need to be very, very careful with our freedom. Okay? Okay. So now the Pharisees are there, right? We're going to go into verse 16. And we are told in verse 16, and this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. Okay? On the Sabbath. So John the writer tells us why Jesus is being persecuted. He's healing on the Sabbath, which is classified as work. You can't work on the Sabbath. How dare you heal on the Sabbath? Okay? These were religious rules, not commanded by God. Furthermore, Jesus tells him that God the Father and he are working. Leave us alone. We have work to do. Okay? And this just provides more fuel for the Pharisees' hate because he is now equating himself with God. They did not miss that. Okay? He is equating himself with God. And then Jesus goes on in this incredible explanation of his relationship with God the Father. He is not God the Father, but he is a distinct part of the deity. He could not do anything apart from the Father, which implies that it wasn't his choice to heal the paralyzed man. It was God the Father's choice versus all those other people. And God had seen something in him. And that this relationship is not one of master-slave, but of father-son. He is being obedient to his Father. Okay? He also warns them that greater works are coming, including resurrections, okay, and eternal judgments. We don't like that one so much. We take resurrections all day long, but eternal judgment's also coming, okay? And then he also goes on to explain, if I am testifying of myself, of course I'm a false witness. According to Deuteronomy 19:15, you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses to prove something true, okay? Well, Jesus goes on to provide his own witnesses too. Witness number 1, John the Baptizer. He proclaimed who I was. I am the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. So testimony of John the Baptizer. Eyewitness number 2, all the works that he's done so far, all the miracles that he's been able to perform, they could be evidence in a court of law. Number 3, the Father. God the Father said when I was baptized, this is mine only begotten Son in whom I am well pleased. So you have testimony from God the Father. So we have 3 witnesses right here. It's providing all the evidence they need. Case dismissed against Jesus, right? No. Well, the Pharisees, they held the Old Testament in high regard. They loved it. They valued it. They studied. They meditated on it. They talked about it. They memorized it, and they missed it. They missed it. They missed the Messiah staring them right in the face. And all the evidence staring them right in the face. They missed it. Okay? It is a dangerous practice to study the Word apart from the author. Okay? They studied that all day long. They knew it backwards and forwards. That's a Hebrew joke. They missed the author. They missed the point. Okay? They didn't have a mind issue. They had a heart issue. Okay? So Jesus even revealed that a day would be coming where they would believe a false Messiah over him. Like he had all of these claims to back up his claim, and this guy who's coming is not going to have as much evidence as I have. You're going to believe him. Okay? So he prophesied about the Antichrist who was coming. And Jesus tells them that even Moses, their most highly regarded person, even Moses talked about the Messiah and what he would be like, and you don't even believe Moses. Who are you going to believe? Okay? And Jesus called them to believe what was written about him, that he was the Messiah, the Son of God. Alright, so the feast ends and Jesus decides to go back to Galilee, goes back to home in Capernaum. Okay? So let's go back to Matthew 12 and verses 1. Matthew 12:1 says, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. Starting to notice the pattern here. On the Sabbath, his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. Okay? So Jesus goes back to Galilee to go back to his teaching and healing ministry, and they are walking through a field grain one day. Okay? We're told it's on the Sabbath ahead of time. Right? Matthew prepares us for what's coming. Now Jesus and his disciples are walking along and they get hungry. Well, if you know anything about wheat, it grows up in heads. Okay? And normally you would harvest those heads, but you wouldn't go around plucking it. You would take a sickle and you would chop it all down, and then you would throw it up in the wind, and the wheat and the chaff would get separated from the wind. Okay, that's a traditional way to harvest. But there were laws in place that you needed to leave behind some food on the outer edges of your field. So whether this field was harvested or not, the outside edges were for people who were hungry and needy. Okay? Now, this was not considered stealing in this culture, because according to Deuteronomy 23 and 25, anyone could come and pluck wheat heads off of your field without it being considered a civil law, breaking of a civil law. Okay? As long as they did not take a sickle and cut it down or take more than what could feed themselves, like you couldn't take home a bushel for your family, okay? You could take enough for yourself and the people who were with you. There was no legal issue here. They were not stealing. Problem was the day of the week, okay? Because if you're plucking heads and then you would rub it in your hand to get out the grain, and then you would put it in your mouth and chew, those were 3 counts of work on the Sabbath. How dare you, sinners? Right? How dare you? You're harvesting, and you're thrashing, and you're cooking. How dare you? That's 3 counts right there. 3 counts against the civil righteous law right there. How dare you? We're going to throw you right in jail. Okay? Here come the Pharisees. Okay? And Jesus answers their question with 2 examples. First, he takes them to 1 Samuel 21, when David, who would be king, is not king at this time, but it would be king, was on the run from Saul, who was trying to kill him, and he was hungry, and God provided for him in a very unique way. Okay? He went to where the tabernacle was, and he asked for food, and the priest brought him the showbread from inside the temple. They didn't have anything else because it was a Sabbath day. They weren't cooking. We got the showbread here, and they gave it to David. He wasn't allowed to eat that, but God told them to eat it, okay? And David's men. Now it's interesting that Jesus brings about this specific story because it involves eating, right? We like stories that involve eating. A human need versus a ceremonial restriction, okay? David was with all of his men, with Jesus and his disciples. We have multiple people involved here. And it also took place on a Sabbath day because it tells us that they were changing out the showbread, which is what you would do on the Sabbath. So it was in the process of changing out the showbread, they gave it to David, so we know it's on the Sabbath. Okay? The other example Jesus gives is about the priests. He says your own priests work on Sabbath days because the sacrifices didn't stop on Sabbath. Actually, they doubled. So the priests are doing twice as much work on Sabbath days. He said, you don't have a problem with them working? You didn't have a problem with David when God provided for him. Why do you have a problem with me and my disciples? Okay? Remember, this is not a legal issue. It is about the day of the week. Okay? And then verse 7 says, and if you had known what this means, quoting, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So he brings back up their homework assignment. He said, fellas, I gave you a homework assignment. Why didn't you go study it? Because if you had studied it, you would have known the lesson and you would have passed the test. So obviously they didn't go do their homework assignment. And Jesus calls them out on that. Okay? He reminds them of this claim. The Messiah is Lord of the Sabbath and greater than the temple. Okay? Alright, so let's go over Luke 6, and we're going to talk about another person that Jesus heals. Spoiler alert, also on the Sabbath. Luke 6, verses 6 and 7. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath so that they might find a reason to accuse him. Okay, so another Sabbath. Remember, what does Jesus do on the Sabbath days around Galilee? He finds a synagogue and he goes in there and he's the guest preacher and he goes and teaches, right? Well, there's a man in there who
Evidently he heals a lot.
and he heals them a lot, that's right. Well, you have a crowd who shows up in the Sabbath. They want to hear the special speaker, right? Good excuse not to miss church that day when there's a special speaker, okay? There's a man with a withered right hand, okay? It literally means to dry up, withered right hand. And there's Pharisees there, and they are watching Jesus. They're keeping their eyes on Jesus the whole time because they know what day of the week it is, and they know what he's going to do, okay? Have a reason to accuse him. Jesus calls the man forward, which is not what you do in the synagogue, okay? He calls him forward to the bema seat, the judgment seat. And he asks the man, not the Pharisees, he asks the man, is it lawful on a Sabbath day to do good or evil, to destroy life or save it? Okay? So he's pointing back to some of the customs that were in question for the religious leaders of, if your donkey on a Sabbath day falls in a hole, you got to get him out. That's going to require work. Do you let your donkey die? That donkey is your livelihood. Do you let your donkey die?
No.
If you go and rescue him, you're breaking the law. How dare you, sinner? What do you do? So he's asking him these questions. Is this lawful? Right? No one answers him. So Jesus decides to answer him. And he heals the man of his hand. Now, in an incredible display of healing and authority, the people rejoice. Nope. The priests, the Pharisees, harden their hearts, and they, I got you, Jesus. Got you right here in front of all these witnesses. Look at this. You're healing again on the Sabbath day. How dare you, sinner? Okay? And that's when they start to plan his end. Not just the end of his ministry, the end of Jesus. So I wonder if there's a Sabbath law about plotting murders.
Not then.
Because they would be breaking that one. It's on the Sabbath day, remember?
That's work.
We're plotting murder. I'm plotting murder on the Sabbath. All Jesus, aware of this, aware of their plot for murder, withdrew from there, and many followed him, and he healed them all, and ordered them not to make him known. Okay? So due to these rising murder plots that he understands and knows, he takes his disciples and he withdraws from the synagogues and the crowds. But the crowds decide to just go follow him because they are still sick. They are still in need of healing. And they know this guy has authority, so they just go and follow him wherever he goes. But as he's healing, and it says all of them, so everybody got their healing, okay? He tells them, don't talk about it. Don't go out there, listen, I know you've been paralyzed for 38 years. I know you want to go rejoice with your people, but don't talk about it, okay? It's not time yet. Matthew points out, as the scriptures go on, that this is a fulfillment of Isaiah 42, 1 through 5. This is a picture of a gentle and compassionate Messiah who even the Gentiles can trust. This was not the Messiah they were looking for, okay? They were looking for a warrior king Messiah who was coming to kill all the Gentiles and reclaim Jewish rule and right, okay? That's not what Isaiah gives a picture as. And Matthew points this out. Yes, I have enough time. All right, we're going to go over our 12 guys. All right. Jumping back to Luke, I know I'm jumping all around, but it wasn't written in chronological order. Don't blame me. I didn't write it. I just teach it. All right. Luke 6, verse 12. And in these days, so the same days as Jesus is teaching around and healing, Jesus went out to the mountain to pray. And all night he continued in prayer to God. And when day came, he called to his disciples and chose from them 12, whom he named apostles. Okay, so we got a crowd of people who he's healing. We have a mixed multitude of people. We got Hebrews, we got Gentiles, we got men, we got women, we got children. We got a whole bunch of people here, right? All these people that have been following Jesus around, okay? So in response to the opposition of the Pharisees, Jesus withdraws and he goes and prays all night long by himself. From sundown to sun up, he prays for the 12 men that he is going to call. Now this is very important because these 12 men would become a foundation for what was getting ready to happen to the rest of the world, okay? So it's very important that he was going to make the selection very carefully. Did he already know who the 12 were he was going to call? He was praying for them. Okay? Praying for what was going to happen. Now, if you have been following along with us, and for those of you who haven't, a few of these guys, this is the third time he has called them. Remember our Mr. Peter and 3 in his life? This is the third call for Peter, for Andrew, for James, and for John. Okay, so this is the third call for some of them. Now, Matthew and Mark tell us that Jesus gave these 12 the authority to preach first, authority to preach just like him, and then over unclean spirits and the ability to heal, okay? So he imposes some of his authority on these 12 gentlemen. But remember, preaching is first. The message comes first for Jesus. Then the cleaning of the unclean spirits and the healing diseases. All right, so for the rest of our time, we're going to go over some of our disciples. Now, the first couple of guys, you're going to recognize that we've gone over before, but the first disciple of Jesus, we're going to go in chronological order. We have Mr. Andrew, okay? And he is Andrew ben Jonah. Hebrew tradition, you take your father's name. They didn't have last names. You were the son of. That means son of. His father's name was Jonah, Andrew ben Jonah, okay? He is our fisherman from Capernaum. He is a former follower of John the Baptizer. Okay, so he's the first one we get introduced to. Now we're not told the name of the other John the Baptizer disciple, but we know it's John. Okay, he is John ben Zebedee. His father is Zebedee, which is a really fun name to say. Okay, and we refer to him in this class as the writer, and you're going to find out in a minute why we give some of them special names. But he is John the writer, John the gospel writer. Okay, John the writer. He's also a fisherman from Capernaum and the other follower of John the Baptizer. Andrew then gets his brother, Peter. So he is Peter ben Jonah. Jesus calls him Simon, or Cephas, as in the different languages both mean the same thing, rock. So he is a fisherman from Capernaum. Remember, these four guys are all fishermen. And he's brother of Andrew. He is number 3 who gets called. I told you, 3 shows up a lot in Peter's life, so he's the 3rd disciple that gets called. Okay? Then we have James. Okay? This is James Ben Zebedee. Excuse me. This is John's brother. Okay? James, who's probably John's older brother. We're not 100% sure on that one, but because John is probably a teenager, James is probably older than he is. Okay? So he is the brother of John the writer. He's a fisherman from Capernaum, and Jesus affectionately calls these 2 brothers the sons of thunder. Okay? We're going to see why. They have short tempers. Okay? But Jesus affectionately calls them sons of thunder. All right, and then we met Philip. Okay, he's from Bethsaida. We don't really know a whole lot more about Philip, but he brings his friend Nathaniel to Jesus. Okay? Now, Nathaniel, you will also be heard called Bartholomew. Okay, his name shows up as Bartholomew in a couple places. Bartholomew is the Aramaic word for son of Ptolemy. So he's basically Nathaniel ben Ptolemy, his father's name. Ptolemy. Okay, that's what Bartholomew means. Bar, son of Ptolemy. Okay, he's from Canaan. His friend is Philip, who brought him to Jesus. He's the one who doubted any good thing could come out of Nazareth. Okay, that's Nathaniel, Bartholomew. And then we learned first today about Matthew, our tax collector. Okay. Mark 2:14 also gives him another name. His name is Levi. And we're told that he is the son of Alphaeus. Now, we don't know who Alphaeus is, but he's the son of Alphaeus. The original audience would have known who Alphaeus is. We don't. But Mark tells us that his name is Levi ben Alphaeus. This could have been pointing in the direction that he is from the tribe of Levi. Who were the tribe of Levi? They were a priest. We got a tax collector who's from a priestly family. Ooh, talk about another traitor, right? It is a distinct possibility that he left the Levitical priesthood and went to go be a tax collector. Okay? So it might point in that
Doesn't
direction.
it say that when he's dishonored his family?
Huge disgrace. Not only that you're a tax collector, but you're a priestly family. Huge disgrace for Matthew.
What a scandal.
Huge scandal that
Big
day.
scandal.
Oh, and then he leaves his tax booth. He leaves behind Rome's taxes sitting on a table. So he's a traitor to Rome too. We don't give Matthew enough credit for the sacrifices he had to give up. Okay? So that's our Matthew. And then the rest of the guys are not given their own individual call, but it seems from this text that Jesus chose them on this day together. So these are the guys that you're usually familiar with being called all on the same day. So we have them in another James. You wonder if Jesus chose some of these guys just because he couldn't remember all their names. Right? We got another James here. Now this James, Matthew 10:11 mentions that he is also the son of Alphaeus, which is interesting because nowhere else does it tell us that these 2 are brothers. It says all the time that these 2 are brothers and these 2 are brothers, but it never mentions that these 2 are brothers. But Matthew is the one who tells us that James is the son of Alphaeus. Okay? So we might give a little bit of credit to the guy who is the son of Alphaeus to say if this guy is the son of Alphaeus, he's probably claiming him as his brother. Okay? We're not distinctly told. And there is another gentleman that we will talk about in a minute, who is also called Cleopas. And these are from the same root. So it's possible they're the same person. It is also possible they are 2 different people. Okay? So we're going to hold on to that one. We're going to come back to that one. So it is possible that these 2 are also brothers. If that's true, we have 2 brothers and 2 brothers and 2 brothers and 2 friends as our first 8 disciples here. Okay, so all of these guys were very familiar with each other. Okay, they're not strangers. Okay, so that's James. Okay, and he's usually referred to as James, poor guy, James the Less. Okay, he's usually referred to this because it is possible he was younger, he was probably shorter of stature, possibly, or because this guy takes the spotlight, so he kind of gets pushed out of the spotlight. So he's referred to as James the Less. If you watch The Chosen, he's James the Younger, little James. That's what they refer to him as. Okay. All right. So then we have Thomas, who is also called Didymus. Both words mean twin. Okay. So it is that he has a twin. We're not told who his twin is, but he has a twin. He is one of twins. And he will become, unfortunately, famous for doubting the risen Jesus. Okay? We'll get there. That's Thomas. And then we have Thaddeus, who also we don't know a whole lot about, other than we know his father's name. He is Thaddeus ben James. No relation to these James. Another guy named James. Okay? Some manuscripts call him Labius. Okay? Or Judas, not that one. Okay? Judas, son of James, is what he's often referred to. It is possible from all of this that he was born the name Judas, but because the name Judas becomes a big issue, he is referred to as either Thaddeus or Labius, which means, get ready for this, girls, okay? It means heart child, but distinctly, more accurately translated, heart of the breast, okay? Child of the breast. He was probably a very tender child, one who did not want to be away from mommy, okay? If you get the drift, he's this kid.
Mama's boy.
He's a mama's boy. That's what those 2 words mean. He's a mama's boy, okay? So our dear Thaddeus is a mama's boy, okay? But he was probably born Judas in his...
It is fine.
It is fine to be a mama's boy. His family probably gave him these names. He was probably born Judas, but called Thaddeus by his family because he's a mama's boy. Okay? And then we have Simon. Alright? Another Simon. We don't know anything about where Simon comes from other than he is a zealot. Okay? He is of the radical zealot party who wanted to remove all Gentiles and their influence from the Jewish. Okay, we got Matthew who's a tax collector, right? He's got Roman soldiers behind him. Do you think these 2 got along at first? This would have been a huge faux pas to have a group of zealots and tax collectors together. But remember, Matthew is a former tax collector. He gave it up. He had to walk away from it. He can't go back. Okay? And then finally, always listed last, is we have Judas Iscariot. Okay? He's the one who keeps the money pouch and will eventually betray Jesus. So this is our 12 men that Jesus picks. He names them apostles, and he gives them special authority. And these are the fellows that we are very familiar with. Okay? So up to here, we're very familiar with these first 8. We don't really know a whole lot about these guys, but all of them are going to become very important. Now, if you will grant me, turn over to Luke 8, verse 1. Soon after, he went on through cities and villages, we're still in Galilee, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, so these 12 gentlemen right here, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, of whom 7 demons were gone out of, and Jonah, the wife of, that is, Kza. CH is in the back of the throat. Like, Kza. Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. So let's talk about Jesus' female disciples. We are told about Mary, who is also called Magdalene. She is from Magdala, which is up in Galilee. So that means somewhere along the way, Jesus picked her up. She's from Magdala in Galilee. And we're told that Jesus casted 7 demons out of her. Now, you will hear a lot of tradition teach that she's a harlot. That is never mentioned in the Bible. The only thing we ever know about Mary, other than where she's from, is that 7 demons were cast out of her. That is it. Okay? We know no more. Okay? We have Joanna. And we're told that she is the wife of our Kuzza. And that he is the household manager of Herod, the guy who is in control of everything. He runs his finances. He's basically his financial manager of his house. This is the wife. Okay, so Joanna, excuse me. We have Susanna, who poor Susanna we know nothing about, other than her name is Hebrew. So she is just more than likely a Hebrew woman. And unfortunately we know nothing more. Okay? Now, these 3 are mentioned by name in the passage in Luke, but we've already met another one. We've met Jesus' mother, Mary. We're going to call her Mary of Nazareth. Okay? Nazareth. Okay? She's Jesus' mom. She will be found at the foot of the cross when we get there. We will also discover that she has a sister who also follows Jesus, but never mentioned by name. She is the sister of Mary of Nazareth. She will also be found at the foot of the cross. We know nothing more about her, unfortunately, other than she is Jesus' aunt. We also will meet another woman named Salome. She is the wife of Zebedee. I love saying his name. She's the wife of Zebedee, which also makes her the mother of John and James. Okay, so she's following her 2 sons in their rabbi. Okay, she's also found at the foot of the cross. And then we have 2 sisters. We're going to call one Mary of Bethany and her sister Martha. These are sisters of Lazarus. Okay, they live in Bethany. And then we're also going to meet one called the other Mary. By this point they get tired because we have a lot of Marys, and she's just referred to as the other Mary. Now, she is referred to as the mother of James the Less. So this guy's mother, okay? And of a Joseph that we don't know anything more of. So she is the mother of James the Less and Joseph. It is possible that if James the Less is the brother of Matthew, who's the son of Alphaeus, that she is Alphaeus's wife. Okay? That is possible. And she is also tied to Cleopas. So again, there's evidence here that these 2 are the same man, but this could be 2 people or 1 person, because it says that she is of Cleopas. We don't know if that means wife, sister, mother. We don't know. It just says of Cleopas, and we have no relation there. Okay? So it is possible that we have another mother of a group of brothers who are also following. Okay? Or these could be 2 separate people. We're not 100% sure on that one. But it also tells us that there are many other women who are following after Jesus. So we have a huge collection of people here following after Jesus. And we normally just see him with a handful of guys walking around, right? We have a crowd who he travels with. And Luke tells us that these women financially support his ministry. Now, we average about 13 women in here. How would y'all, starting tomorrow, feel about taking care of the financial needs of all the pastors of First Baptist Church? Would y'all sign up for that? Everybody need to pull all your resources, all your paychecks, retirement account, savings account, whatever. I want y'all to bring it next Sunday, and we are going to fund the pastors here so they don't have to worry about any needs.
They might
have
have
to
to
We're gonna be needing 5,000 some fish, stones turned to
Right?
fish.
Would any of y'all sign up for that? Any of y'all be interested in that? That's what happened in Jesus' ministry. Because we're told that all of these men walked away from their ability to work. Okay? So these women take on the financial responsibility of not only Jesus, but all of these people who are following after them. Now remember, in that day and age, That would have been almost impossible, okay? Hebrew women could not be independently wealthy. It was against their culture and tradition. They could not own their own money. But many of them had their own dowry, which was supposed to be their nest egg for when their husband died. Their dowry was to help them provide for themselves. So they could have been giving up their own dowry. One theory that I love is that their families were in support of Jesus because remember, he's the Messiah.
They're the moms of some of these.
Some of these guys, right? Their whole family's like, yeah, go for it. He's the Messiah. We're going to financially support him and, feed our own children, right? Okay? It is also possible that some of these are Greek women who could be financially independent, okay? So we probably have a mixture here of the financial support coming from independently wealthy women, women who have the support of their families, and women who may be jeopardizing their future by giving up their own dowries, okay? And these women financially support Jesus and his disciples and the whole mass that is following after him, okay? So think about that as members of a church. Imagine you being responsible with the rest of the ladies in this room for every pastor's need for 3 years. Would you sign up for that? Because these ladies did. They walked away from their life and their home to follow Jesus.
They had a strong conviction,
Absolutely.
and able to do that. And
They're all in.
Yes.
They're all in for him. Now, they don't know it's a 3-year commitment. They believe it's for life. Because in order for him to become Messiah and set up his rule, that would have been a lifelong commitment. They didn't know it was only going to last 3 years. Okay? So they're all in for this guy. They firmly believe that he is Messiah. He's going to change things. So they're all in. Okay? And like I said, most of these, if you were keeping track, there's a handful of these women on this list that aren't at the moment of his crucifixion. They're there at his feet, all in till the end. And all but one of these guys take off. Okay? So when we get there, you'll see that. These ladies are all in to the end.